Hi guys, welcome to the 5th week of the Intro to Android course. This week we'll be talking about fragments and navigation systems. What is special about this week and next week is that we are splitting fragments into two separate lectures. So this week we'll just be talking about how to implement a fragment and how to integrate it into your project. And then next week we'll be talking about how to share data across different fragments. So at a high level, a fragment is just an Android component that allows you to reuse different UI elements across separate screens. And we'll go into an example of what that actually looks like. So these are screenshots from the Eatery Android app. As you see here, there are several shared components on the screen. You see the app bar at the very top being used across several screens. And you also see the bottom navigation bar being used across several screens. So one way we can implement this is that we can create separate activities for each of these screens and just copy and paste the code for the app bar and the bottom navigation bar across all these different activities. But that's not really a scalable solution because if you have like 10 different screens, then you would be copy and pasting this code 10 times. And if you decide to make a change to, let's say, the bottom navigation bar, then you will have to change it in all these different instances. So one way we can organize our app is that we can just implement the app bar and the bottom navigation bar once in the activity and have a container in the middle that switches in and out depending on what are the screens that we want to show. And these interchangeable screens are called fragments. So the area that you see outlined in orange are actually different fragments. So in this case, we have the main list fragment, the weekly menu fragment, and also the login fragment. And as the user click on different icons on a screen, the corresponding fragment would show up. So at a high level, fragments live within activities, and fragments are not declared in a manifest file. And that just means that your app doesn't know what fragments exist within like the app until runtime. So there are three reasons to use a fragment. The first reason is to reuse different UI components, as we saw with Eatery. The second reason is to add more modularity to your app architecture. So if you decide to maybe in the future switch out a different screen or refactor a screen, instead of recreating that entire screen, you could very easily just like switch in a different fragment, and it requires a lot less code and time. And that just allows your code to be more scalable. And finally, like we mentioned, it reduces redundancy in your code base, and that also increases the scalability of your app. So in terms of lifecycle, this is like a very complex topic, but all you need to know is that fragment lifecycle events are actually very similar to activities. The main difference is that a fragment's lifecycle is attached to the host activity. So if I decide to destroy a fragment, let's say fragment A, it doesn't affect the activity or fragment B. But if I decide to destroy fragment, if I decided to destroy like the activity, it would actually destroy fragment A and B. And here is just more about the life cycles. This code seems like a lot, but Kevin will be going over in a demo what all these different components mean in detail. But all you need to know is that there is a new instance function at the very bottom inside companion object. A companion object is just a way in Kotlin to declare static variables and methods. So in this case, this is where you'll input all the parameters you want for your fragment, and we just bundle it up inside of a bundle. Then inside onCreate, this is where you retrieve the fragments, you will retrieve the arguments and the parameters that you inputted into your fragment. And onCreate is called first. After onCreate is called, onCreateView is called, and this is where you inflate the layout of your fragment and also where you set your UI components and your listeners. Yeah, so there are two ways to integrate a fragment into the activity. The first way is to use a fragment tag in XML, which we do not recommend. And it kind of defeats the purpose of fragments if you hard-code it into XML because fragments are meant to be interchangeable. So instead, we should programmatically add it to a certain view group or to a certain layout. And there are two different classes we need to do this. One is a manager and one is transactions. So the manager just manages all the different fragments and activity, and a manager also manages the fragment transactions. So fragment transactions are just different actions you can apply to a fragment that includes like creating the fragment, removing it, replacing it, etc. And these are just code snippets of what that might look like. It's actually very simple and doesn't require a lot of lines of code. So you see here, we just call the fragment, we begin a transaction, and then we either add maybe a fragment to a container or we replace it. And again, Kevin will go into more details in the demo. Next, we'll be talking about navigation systems within Android. And this is a really important topic because as you start to add new screens and new fragments to your app, you'll need some sort of way to organize the different screens so that it's intuitive for the user to navigate across these screens. The first type of navigation and the most common type that you'll see within Android apps is the bottom navigation bar. This is a bar at the bottom of the app with icons, and as a user click on an icon, they can open up a different screen. And normally this is used as the highest level of navigation. And an important thing to note is that normally it's recommended to have 3 to 5 different icons in the bottom navigation bar. If you have any more or less than that, it's generally recommended to use a different type of navigation system. Another type of navigation system that you'll see is a tab layout here. And basically this allows the user to swipe across different screens, and it feels very nice because like you can actually it's a very fluid motion and it's a lot faster than just like clicking on icons. And normally this is used either at the highest level of navigation or as a secondary navigation. So in this case with these two examples with Starbucks and Airbnb, it's actually used as a secondary navigation system. And finally, we have the drawer layout. This is normally triggered by either swiping a certain direction to open up the drawer or clicking on the hamburger menu. And the drawer layout was more common a few years ago, but it's a little less common now. And the reason why is because the Android OS, they decided to add a new functionality that kind of mimics iOS phones. So that functionality basically allows users to swipe right to go back a screen, basically mimicking the functionality of a back button. But because of that, it actually messed with a lot of apps because a lot of apps use the swipe right functionality to open up the drawer layout. So the user would be often confused if they swipe right, possibly to go back a screen and they get the layout, they get the drawer layout to open, or if they swipe right to open up the drawer and they actually go back a screen. And that's why you'll see with certain apps, they actually move the drawer layout to the right side. So now it's triggered through like a left swipe. Yeah, and normally information related to user profile is added to the drawer, and also redirects to any screens that aren't necessarily used every single day is also put inside this drawer layout. So as you see with these two examples, information like archive, maybe saved information, maybe history information, also like settings is all put within the drawer layout. And that's it for different navigation systems. So Kevin will be giving a demo on how to implement a bottom navigation bar or how to integrate that with Fragments. Yeah, you don't necessarily need to know how to implement all 3 different types of navigation systems for this course. But if you're interested in learning how or learning how to implement them, we do have code examples in our textbook. Yeah, and now on to the demo.
And welcome back to the demo. So today we're going to be talking about fragments, how to manipulate them, and essentially how you can use them. We're going to be pretty much covering a similar path to how your homework will be written, in the sense that we're going to be playing around with the view pager, which is something we use quite often in Eatery, and we're going to be using the view pager for our fragments today. Let's first play around with some fragments, shall we? Let's create a new one. We are perfectly fine with you just using an existing, Google fragment. But let's do a full screen blank one. Blank. Let's go for blank. This is going to be a blank fragment. I'm going to call it test fragment. and I want it to be in Kotlin. And so, does some building, whatnot. Yeah, let's take a quick look at this fragment. You'll notice that it comes with a few parameters that it can be initialized by. A onCreate method, an onCreateView method, and a companion object. Let's look in the layout, and we should find a fragment test, which has a single piece of text that says "hello blank frag." That's a fragment's pretty much just a fragment's pretty much just a smaller, compacted version of an activity, one that can fit inside an activity and will stay active when it's on screen. This way you can swipe through a few things and it doesn't look like you're jumping drastically between pages. It smooths out the transition a lot. So we have our fragment here, and let's play around with a few. Let's go into main activity, and inside the XML, instead of having hello world here, I'm just gonna trash you. And instead, let's put in a sliding view pager. It's telling me, yep. So it didn't recognize what this was. However, essentially what it had to do was go into build.gradle and tell it, yes, we're using a view pager here. We want to use the view pager structure. We're going to import view pager. And it did. So now we have a view pager that takes up the whole screen. This thing will be used to hold our fragments. What we're going to do in here now, inside the app compact activity, is to define essentially what kind of how to hold these fragments. So here, let's create a private late initialized variable called view pager, and let's give it a type view pager 2. Let's initialize it here. View pager equals find view by ID r.id.pager, because that was what that piece of code I pasted in was default set to. And let's keep going a bit. It needs an adapter. So val pager adapter. And I'm going to set that equal to a pager adapter. However, I'm going to have to create an adapter for this. And so what I'm going to do to create this adapter will be to make a new adapter for it. Private inner. Inner identifies it as a class inside a class. I'm going to call this inner class screen. Slide pager adapter. It will take in a fragment called a fragment activity. And it needs to be of type fragment activity. Luckily, the great thing is app compact activity extends fragment activity, so I don't really have to care much about that in terms of using just default main activity stuff. And I want a fragment state adapter. Yes. Cool. And I'm going to override a few functions because it will scream at me if I don't. Implement members. I want these both. Okay. To get the count, essentially it needs to know how many things are going to be inside your adapter. And in this case, let's create a big old private variable here. Private val number of pages. General consensus when it comes to constants, uppercase and underscores. That is just industry standard stuff. Number of pages, I want, for now, 6 pages. And so, return num pages. Not a problem. And for create fragment, well, we have a fragment now. We have a test fragment. So, in this case, return test fragment. Does test fragment take any arguments, is the question. Go away. Test fragment, a new instance takes a string and a string. We could just null this out to 0, but I do want it to take at least one thing just to demonstrate how inputting something into this works. So I'm just going to remove one of the parameters from the whole thing. And so I'm going to have this param1 called string. And so I'm going to give this page position. It's not happy with me because I mixed too many arguments for... I created a new... .new instance. Yep, that's happy now. Convert it to... There we go. Yeah, Kotlin likes it when you use these kinds of template systems, where essentially you can keep typing text, and then to put any variable in there, you just use $sign and variable. Kotlin likes it better that way. Just checking, that does return a fragment. Yep, okay, so that's happy with me. Pager adapter, and let's create a slide pager adapter with this, the main activity, as its activity. And finally, let's just set the adapter to the view pager. Pager adapter. And in theory, this should already work a little bit. Does humming trigger YouTube copyright? We'll see. That's happy. Hello, blank fragment. Hello, blank fragment. Hello, blank fragment. Hello, blank. And this should be the last one. See? Look, we have a big sliding view of all of these in a list. And exactly 6 of them, I believe. Which is really nice, right? You can see immediately the use of something like this where you have, like in Eatery where we only have 3 of them. No, we only have 2 of them. One between the standard Cornell eateries and College Town eateries. So yeah, and you can see how nice it is to navigate between these things. I believe Snapchat uses these. Yeah, and let's make it a bit more easy to distinguish which one we're on, because right now it just says hello blank fragment. What's a blank fragment, right? So in the onCreate, just like any other onCreate, let's no, we should do it here. So here it will set the parameter to the argument parameter. And in here, I'm going to shift and cut. And that, let's see, I want this value view of type view is equal to the fragment inflator, and we're going to return the view at the end. However, in the middle, why is it unhappy? Inlined now. So in the meantime, view.find view by ID, because this is how you should do it inside a fragment. You should still use view by ID because this fragment might not exist uh, when when that's called, it might not exist yet, or like the things on screen might not exist, so it'll throw errors. However, if you use find view by ID, it generally doesn't complain. I'm going to call this fragment fragment text. Frag text. I'm going to give it some values. Let's say that's the down here in T, I believe. Yes. All right. So text size 30. I want it big. Text style bold. I want it big. And in this case, the alignment, I want it to be centered. Yeah, that looks better. That looks better. And you know what? Just for fun. No, that's good. That's quite good. Oh, right. So let's go into the fragment and let's find r.id.fragText, which is the fragment text view. It's not happy because it can't infer the variable. Not a problem. So I'm going to say the value of this text frag text is of type text view and is equal to, yep, import that. Now that's happy. And then from here, frag text.set.text is equal to, let's say parameter one. This should work. And in theory, this should give each and every one of those pages a more distinct text value. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 0 through 5 because it's indexing that way. Yep. So there we have it. 5 different pages with 5 pages with different things on them. You can see how this extends now to the to how we can put things into these views. We can also have different views show up in different positions, right? So right now we only have one fragment that shows pretty much the same thing on each page. That's boring. Let's give it another fragment. I want a second fragment, and I want this one to still be a blank fragment. Still be a blank fragment because some of these other things require weird whatnots. So this one I'm going to call 3 fragment. And in 3 fragment, instead of being completely blank, I'm going to make it a bit more fun in the sense that I'm going to say that the frame layout holds a text view that let's give it something interesting. What widget would be interesting? A web view would certainly be interesting, but I have nothing to web view with. So I'm just going to give it an image view and give it a scenic background. Boom. So there you are. Fragment 3 works perfectly fine without anything. So let's go into our main activity and say that, let's use the when command and put in position and say that if anything happens that's not one of these, if it is fragment in position 3, we will return 3 fragment. Otherwise, it will return this test fragment. And now, page 0, page 1, page 2, hello blank fragment, page 4, page 5. So the central fragment in the middle is this one. Why didn't oh, does that thing not have yeah, where'd the scenic background go? Oh well, you get that this works. You get that this works, and I've run into a problem that I don't quite know what it's about. But, so in the meantime, let's also take a quick look at an alternative, at some of the built-in measures that Android has that you can just quickly start up an app with. It's not going to be quite as useful for our homework per se, but it will be very useful in terms of like making similar looking fancier apps in the future. So I'm going to set up a new project. I'm going to give it a bottom navigation activity. And let's call this, yeah, I'm just going to run on defaults. So let's take a quick look at what this does. This is also this is a built-in template built into Android Studio, where you may pull a Fragment navigation controller. What this will essentially do is it'll put a fragment up here, essentially a host fragment up here that'll hold whatever's in that fragment, and a bottom navigation view. This tells it that this is a bar with these three things configured in it. The navigation is set up in a way so that home is the default, and there are these three screens, each of which have these names, have these layouts, and are attached to these fragments. So in this system, a lot of it's not in the code. It's in these XML files, which are dictating where everything goes. This is the bottom nav menu. This is dictating what is the icons being shown on this main screen, the home buttons and all that. This is telling it what it is. So let's go into design and let's swap out this icon for home with a star. And you'll notice that on the screen, it's become a star. And so a lot of this is being done essentially through these XML files and using the navigation system to guide you from one view to another. You can also use this to tell things that after you go back, if you hit the back button, it shouldn't actually send you back to the previous screen, but like a few screens before. Like if there was a home view and you went through a few screens and you want to go back to home instead of all those like little parts before, that might be useful to you. And exactly the same idea, right? You create these things and they have essentially a fragment in them that you can set up with whatever you'd like inside the text. This is telling me that's the home fragment, that's the dashboard, that's notifications. You don't swipe between them because you have this home dash bar. You have this little home bar, and you can put anything you'd like in these. This is an alternate method. You know, you have the one where you slide in from the side. You have many options when it comes to these fragments and how to display views really nicely with them. So you'll see that like this thing staying constant while these things out here are changing. That's a really nice feature of having fragments where you're not loading whole new pages. And yeah, that's roughly all we have to talk about fragments today. Thanks for watching lecture. Yeah, thanks for watching lecture 5 now. If you've made it all the way through, congratulations. And good luck on the homework. This time we're going to be having you essentially set up the gallery, a wallpaper app. Essentially, it'll look like the gallery of your phone where you have like the big full screen photo and you swipe through them, and you can set one. You can set a few to be your wallpaper. That's the this is going to be done with Fragments with that same view pager that we've talked about in demo. And yeah, good luck, have fun, and we'll see you next week.